And welcome to another edition of the Sunday Wrap with Crowcast. You're joined by just me tonight, Phoenix67. So hopefully I won't bore you with talking to myself and asking myself questions. And we'll get through the weekend's results and talk about the Crows match. Don't forget, if you'd like to keep me company and give me someone to talk to, the chat window is open at Spreaker.com/user/AFL Crowcast. And I've got Skype open at the moment. The Skype username is BF Crowcast. If you'd like to come on board and have a chat, you'd be more than welcome to. Otherwise, you guys are just going to be stuck listening to me for the next 30 to 40 minutes. After the last tirade following the Hawthorn game, many of you would probably be expecting me to go absolutely ballistic tonight regarding the umpiring over the Western Buldogs, but I'm just going to cool my heels on that one for a little while, and we will cover that in a small amount of detail at some stage during the show. But let's just run through the results of the weekend first of all and see what's been going on. Obviously, on Friday night, we had the Hawks ending up comfortable winners over the Richmond Tigers, getting up by 46 points. Yesterday, we had Carlton with a really solid win versus a quite disappointing Collingwood. Their season continues to go from bad to worse. The Cats giving the flat track West Coast Eagles a bit of a thumping, winning by 44 points down there at Simmons. Sydney Swans comfortable over Essendon, 135 to 54. Melbourne Demons giving the Suns a touch-up. The Suns are in a bit of strife, obviously undermanned, but still not the result they would have been looking for there, going down 160 to 87. That's a nice old 70-odd point smashing for them. We had the Giants getting their first ever win in Western Australia over the Fremantle Dockers. I actually tipped the Dockers thinking that it might have been a bridge too far for the Giants, but no, their good form continues, and Fremantle's woes continue. They went down by 3 goals in the end. Today we had 2 games. The Kangaroos getting up in a good one over a pretty gallant St Kilda. Bad kicking could have cost Kangaroos a bit, but they ended up getting up by 7 points. And we had the Power getting back on the winners list. It's actually unbelievable that they have the same win-loss as us. Getting up over the Brizzy Lions pretty comfortably after a gallant start by the Lions. They just didn't have the tickets, the fuel in the tank to do anything after quarter time really, and they went down by 77 points to the Power, 21 goals 10 to 7 goals 17. Right, obviously the Crows match is the one that we're all interested in, and the final score, as if you didn't know, was Western Bulldogs 18 goals 15, 123 to the Adelaide Crows 17 goals 6, 108. Now, as I mentioned before, we might talk about the umpiring at some stage, but irrespective of the efforts of one particular individual in green, it was an extremely disappointing match, I thought, by the Adelaide Footy Club. I stated earlier in the week that I thought we needed to win the midfield to have any chance at all of winning this game, and as it turned out, we basically got thumped in the midfield. None of our midfield guns really fired a shot in anger, which was very, very disappointing. Our highest midfield disposal winner was Matt Crouch, who had 24 disposals, 13 kicks and 11 handballs. Really didn't hurt the opposition with any of his disposals. And whilst we all travelled at reasonably good disposal efficiency, we just didn't get enough of the ball. That's what it came down to. We turned the ball over at critical times. Notable statistics, we had Cole Chaney, our what I thought was our leading defender, really. I thought he actually played quite well. Even though he has his knockers, I felt the defence was under siege, and I felt he did pretty well. Travelled at 92.9% disposal efficiency, so probably putting the doubters to shame there with his disposal efficiencies. 10 kicks, 4 handballs. 3 contested possessions, 11 uncontested, so he was trying to work his way into the rebound situation. Our best player was probably Josh Jenkins, who played really well, presented up forward very well. Only obviously had the 13 disposals, but an 8 goal return was an excellent return from Josh. Didn't do much in the middle, but took 5 marks inside 50, and that's what you want from the big fella. And some of his marks were contested and quite good. Other noticeables, I thought Rory Atkins did okay, tried to get himself involved, 16 possessions, 8 kicks, 8 handballs, 6 contested possessions, running at about 81% disposal efficiency. We had Rory Sloane had a very quiet game. Only the 19 disposals was heavily blanketed by the Bulldogs. They obviously saw him as a major threat. Kicked the ball at a shocking 58% disposal efficiency, 4 clangers, and really, as much as he tried, and he did try, he couldn't influence the game to any particular extent. I'm looking at Scotty Thompson's tackle count here of 9. I wonder if they count an illegal tackle as a tackle, because you'd think after 33 years on the planet and, close on 300 games, Scotty Thompson would have learnt how to tackle by now. And yes, he was hard done by a couple of times, but gee whiz, Scott, you just have to adapt to what the opponents are doing. And these days, with the shoulder shrug perfected by Selwood and now taken on by a few other teams, you really have to get in low and make those tackles. You cannot tackle a player around the upper bicep because it will end up high contact, and when you've got someone on the trigger as trigger happy as Mr. Pinnell, you're going to get pinged every time. Tommy Lynch, I thought, did very well. 24 disposals, 13 kicks, 11 handballs, 9 uncontested possessions. Probably did as best as he could under the circumstances. Who else have we got here? Lukey Brown did okay, 19 touches out of the back line. But really, Eddie Betts was relatively quiet. Charlie Cameron, I thought, provided good pressure around the contest, tried his heart out. But the most disappointing player for mine was Richard Douglas. Only had the 9 disposals, 8 kicks, 1 handball. I've been saying Richie's had a defensive role over the last couple of weeks, but really, when we needed our midfield to step up and when we needed our senior players to step up, we had guys like Douglas with 9 possessions. We had David McKay with 11 possessions. We had, Brad Crouch with 14 possessions. You're never going to win a game of football against any team, let alone a team like the Western Buldogs, with such a low possession count with your midfield rotation. And really, aside from anything else, that's where the game was won and lost. Look, I wanted to touch on a couple of players individually. Brodie Smith at the moment, I think, is really struggling. What the Bulldogs have done last night, and what I think teams are going to increasingly do with us, is not commit so many players forward of the contest. Compare the Richmond and the Port game to the Hawthorn and Western Bulldogs matches, and what you'll see is often our outlet kicks from half-back from a Seedsman or a Brodie Smith going to a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 contest. Often Tex found himself outnumbered on the wing during the contest. Tex was having enough trouble marking the ball without having to have 2 or 3 go up against him. But what we didn't do is adapt to their tactics. We didn't drop the eyes and hit up a guy a little bit short across half-back so we could create the overlap. And I think that's what's actually gone out of our game over the last couple of weeks. In the first couple of weeks, we were really using aggressive handball to create the overlap and to actually clear lines, whereas against the Western Bulldogs, we got stuck very deep. A lot of the game was played in our defensive half, and we made no effort to try and run through with aggressive slick handball. Instead, there was a lot of rush kicking going on. and often to an outnumbered contest. Now, that is borne out if you look at my favourite thing, which is the heat map. For anyone who wants to know what the heat map is, just get the AFL app on your mobile and it shows you there. Basically, we played the game 63% in our defensive half, and the red zone was almost exclusively in the right back pocket. Now, you cannot win a game of football if you're taking so much heat in your defensive half. We only had 127 possessions for the evening, forward of centre. By contrast, the Western Buldogs had 53% of their possessions in their forward half. They actually had, let me have a look here, 228 possessions in their forward half. And their heat map was very concentrated around the middle of the ground. And that is very reflective of the heat map that was shown up in the game versus Hawthorn, where they were quite willing to not commit as many to the contest, keep players back behind the contest so that when we rebounded out, they could pump it straight back in, which I think contributed quite significantly to their massive inside 50 count as opposed to ours. Just touching on that, if I just go to Footy Wire and tell me, Mr. Footy Wire, what some of these stats were when my internet actually loads. Some of the head-to-head stats: contested possessions, Western Bulldogs won by 20 odd. Uncontested possessions was the stat that really reflected their dominance of possession of the ball. They had 262 possessions to our 199 uncontested possessions. 321 to 251 effective disposals. That's 70 extra effective disposals on the night. They were delivering at slightly higher percentage than us, 76.1 as opposed to 73.4. So both teams did turn the ball over a little bit. It was a high-pressure contest, but the Bulldogs just got more of it. 45 to 59 clangers by us, so clearly we made far more skill errors than them on the night. Contested barking. We, particularly in the first quarter, but it carried on throughout the game, we seem to have actually moved away from the defensive strategy of 2 and maybe sometimes 3 men up at a contest. It was very noticeable this week that they took a lot of one-on-one marks. Now, some of that obviously might have been because of rebound inside 50s that they were getting from our turnovers across the middle. But it seemed to me that there was a change in tactics, a change in strategy, maybe brought about by the fact that we didn't want to leave Jake Stringer free. So we weren't prepared to commit his opponent, which was generally Hardigan, who I haven't actually mentioned, but he had a brilliant night. I thought he was... I mentioned Chaney before, but I forgot Kyle. I thought he was actually our most effective backman on the night, 6 rebound 50s. Sorry about that, Kyle. Did an excellent job. But yeah, it didn't seem as if we were prepared to leave a man to contest the incoming high ball like we have been in previous weeks. And as a consequence, we were found wanting more often than not in one-on-one contests. And Daniel Talia is really having a bit of a stinker so far this year and did himself no favours on Saturday night with some pretty soft efforts, I have to say, at the contested ball in the air. So that's disappointing, and I don't know whether that was a strategy that we implemented or whether it was just a result of the way the game was played. But I much prefer to see a Hardigan and or a Chaney or Lever coming in and killing a contest, and we didn't see any of that on Saturday night. Marks inside 50, as a consequence, they shaded us 18 to 13, and had it not been for JJ, that would have been even more out of kilter in their favour. Clearances 40 to 25. Now, clearly, when you're getting a lot of free kicks in the middle like they did, the clearance numbers are going to be a little bit skewed. But we were very one-paced in the middle. We were very one-dimensional in the middle. And I think it's starting to become time that we have a look at our personnel in there. with Brad Crouch, Matt Crouch, Scott Thompson, effectively our main inside midfield players, we are very, very slow. And when they blanket Sloaney and when Douglas has a down game, and we start relying on DMAC to try and boost our midfield rotations, you know we're in trouble. DMAC is not the answer in the middle. He shouldn't be playing in the middle. He's an outside runner, and he is just too light for the inside contest. Pardon me while I just have a cough. So yeah, we got smashed in the clearances. Absolutely smashed in the clearances. Yeah, let's have a look at some of these other stats here if I just flick it over. And you'll have to excuse the odd pause here because talking to myself is quite interesting. It's quite an interesting experience, actually. So yeah, we broke even in the tackle count, but the amount of missed tackles that we made during the course of the game was horrendous. One that springs to mind is Jakey Stringer in the first quarter being able to brush Scott Thompson and then brush David McKay for his first. That really set a pattern for the evening. We didn't lay effective tackles. We tackled too high, too often. We didn't stop them at the contest. Charlie Cameron was probably one of the few who I would have picked up as an effective tackler on the evening. But aside from that, Charlie Cameron had 9 tackles, which is an excellent effort from him. But aside from Charlie, there wasn't too many players who could say that they put in a full 4-quarter effort on that score. Source is the concern as well. Only 30 hit-outs on the night. Now, he is continually getting his pants pulled down by second-string ruckman. We've had Hampson take him to the sword, and now we've had the Bulldogs ruckman take him to the sword. Jordan Roughhead probably eclipsed Sam on the evening. And there's questions got to be asked. I don't know whether Sam is lacking confidence at the moment because his go-to move seems to be that little fend off with the arm, which he continually gets pinged on. But as a consequence, he is not being effective. He's not jumping confidently for the ball, and I didn't think Sam had anywhere near the influence around the ground that he's had over the last couple of weeks, and hence was ineffectual, really, in the result of the game. Scoring shots 33-23 really probably indicates the dominance of the Bulldogs overall, and really it was only our relative conversion percentages that kept us in the game. They scored at 54.5%. We converted at nearly 74%, and was it not for that, and it wasn't necessarily straight kicking because we missed some really momentum sapping goals, particularly early on, Douglas and Mitchy McGovern. It was more a fact that we were getting a lot of shots in the goal square. Josh Jenkins got a couple, and that probably flattered us a little bit. Our inside 50s per scoring shot, 1.61. I mean, you just cannot win a game of football when your inside 50s per scoring shot is 1.61. They doubled that just about, and we were lucky to be in it, really, to be perfectly honest. So, I mean, I don't know really what else to say. I think tactically we're one-dimensional at the moment, I think teams and coaches are working us out now. Basically, what you need to do against the Crows is block their outlet passing and commit less players into the forward line on transition, expecting us to rebound and then being able to hit us back on the counter-attack. And that's exactly what Western Buldogs did to us continually on Saturday night. We didn't move the ball very well at all, or with any system out of our defence, and some of that can be put down to their pressure, but I think a lot of it is put down to our poor disposal and our lack of willingness to work hard and run. I think some players need to have a good look at themselves. Jakey Lever is off the boil at the moment. Whilst his effort will never be questioned, his disposal was atrocious, and he needs to look at himself in that regard. David Mackay didn't give us enough run at all. Rory Atkins certainly tried, but I thought Seedsman and Brodie Smith were down. And I just want to say that I never want to see Ricky Henderson play in defence. He is not a defender. We could have quite comfortably had him playing up the ground, perhaps more effectively, but playing him down back, he's just not. He had 21 disposals. I don't recall him getting a disposal. 2 inside 50s, 6 marks, probably all uncontested without looking too closely at the stats. But Ricky Henderson, if we're putting Ricky Henderson and David Mackay in the team, then I don't understand why we're playing Brad Crouch. Brad Crouch was clearly underdone, and there's a good case to be made for playing Brad Crouch and allowing him to run into fitness and form in the ones. But that's the plan you use if you're taking a longer term view. If you're taking the view that you want to win the match in front of you, then you do not play injured or unfit players. And at the moment we have Brad Crouch severely underdone. We also have Tex Walker severely underdone, carrying a toe or a foot injury of some sort, and I suspect 1 or 2 other things. He's clearly still not confident in jumping for the ball. One of the reasons why he was dropping so many marks was that it's probably the first time in weeks he's actually gone up with 2 hands, but he's still feeling for the ground on landing. So whether he's got a small knee niggle that needs to be looked at, or whether it's the foot, or whether it's just general soreness, or as some people have said to me, a hip problem, I don't know. But I think it's about time we made a call on Tex. I know we've got the Cats this week, and Tex will be vital at least to take an opponent, but I think you might find that Geelong pay a lot more attention to Jenkins, particularly deep, than they do to Tex, and all of a sudden Jenkins becomes the focal point for their defenders, and you would imagine less influential as a result. So yeah, I'm just struggling a little bit to understand what the plan is at the moment at Adelaide. We have a good game plan when our disposal efficiency is up, when players are running, and when we are aggressive with our ball movement, particularly by hand. We have not been allowed space through the corridor for a couple of weeks now, and as I mentioned, with the Bulldogs, teams are starting to work out that you need to clog the midfield against the Crows and not commit too many forward, so that when we rebound out, we're not slingshotting from one end of the ground to the other. So if we're taking a longer term view and we're playing Brad Crouch as a consequence, then I'd suggest that there's probably a couple of other players that need to be looked at as well. David Mackay, as gallant and as serviceable as he's been, I think he needs to make way. I think there are players in the twos that need to be given the opportunity to have a run. Pardon me. Cameron Ellis-Yeoman played well in the twos today. I think Mitch Grigg had his best game for the season, probably for the SANFL side. Jared Lyons would not have done any worse and probably been more effective and damaging than Brad Crouch. He's done nothing wrong. I think players such as that need to be looked at now if we're taking the longer term view. If we're taking the shorter term view, then Brad Crouch shouldn't have played this week. He should have had another run in the twos, and perhaps another run the week after in the twos, until he gets some miles in his legs and is able to run out a match. Because at the moment, Brad, he's just not doing enough. Richard Douglas, is another one who needs to really lift his game. I've been lenient on Richard for a couple of weeks now, as I said earlier, but his output needs to improve. He's a senior member of the team. He's a past club champion. He's played nearly 200 games for the club. And if he can only output 9 disposals in a crunch game where the midfield battle is so important, then question needs to be asked about his form and fitness. Scotty Thompson looked slow on the weekend. Scott has been an absolute beast this season so far. But I think in a game versus probably one of the quicker teams in the competition, it could have been the week to give Scotty a rest. He clearly wasn't up to it. He cannot run two ways. He gets caught on the hop if the ball doesn't come down his throat at clearances and stoppages. And his tackling is and has always been diabolical. He's an absolute warrior, and when the game's running in his favour, he is an absolute beast at dishing out the ball to our creative players. But when the game's not being played on our terms, he looks slow and he looks ineffective, and certainly against the Western Bulldogs, particularly in the first quarter, he was a liability. He turned the ball over 2 or 3 times. He missed a couple of tackles, and really, when the game was there to be won in that first quarter, or when we were there to stamp our authority on the game in the first quarter, there were some critical moments that Scott played a key role in. One handball turnover across half-back, one out of bounds on the full across the wing, missed tackle, Jakey Stringer, among a couple of other midfield moments. And Scott really didn't help our cause in that first quarter, and didn't get a hell of a lot better for the rest of the game. So, a few questions for Don Pike to answer, I think. I think we need a plan B. We need to be able to slow the game down when it's not on our terms. We need to be able to drop the eyes when the midfield is being crowded up. We're not doing a lot of switching of the ball at the moment. We're quite content to kick down the lines, which is... it's just lazy football, and it smacks of a team that is starting to lose confidence in itself and is not running hard enough to make position. The Western Bulldogs were very good on the spread. They caught us on the hop on the fat side of the ground on numerous occasions, and it just didn't look like we had the run or the spirit to be able to match them in that capacity. So the two factors that I think are slowly seeping out of our game, our ability to aggressively move the ball, particularly through the corridor out of our defensive 50, and also our ability to switch the play quickly to create space and take advantage of space on the fat side of the ground. There are players that are just not working hard enough at the moment, and when you let in 355,000 inside 50s for the opposition, you cannot expect the back six to continually accept that amount of pressure. We cannot continue to give up 100 points a game and expect to win games of football against good teams. You cannot expect to lose the clearances to the extent that we've lost the clearances without making some changes in the way that we structure up. Paul A on the chat makes a very good point. It's interesting that we still got close, even though we had a shocking game. Our conversion rate and our inside 50 conversions certainly kept us in the game on the weekend. Against Hawthorn, I felt we were always in it. We were always in with a shot. We were always right in the thick of it. I didn't feel that way against the Western Bulldogs. I felt like if we win the game, we've pinched it. And not that we haven't done that before against the Western Bulldogs, but it didn't really feel like we had control of the game for any length of time, whereas over Hawthorn and even over the Kangaroos earlier in the season, we did at least have control of the game for large periods of the contest. So yeah, some selection issues I think for Don Pike. We need to make a call on a couple of players in terms of injury. We need to settle in on a plan. Are we working towards 2017-18, or are we trying to win games of football this year and make a statement this year and try and hit top 4, which is becoming increasingly difficult? If it's the former, then I think we can afford to play a Brad Crouch and run him into form and fitness. We can afford to drop David McKay. We can afford to limit Scott Thompson's time on ground. We can afford to blood some youngsters and let them develop in the ones. Give time to Ellis Yeoman, give time to Mitch Grigg perhaps, even gift a game or two to Troy Menzel and see what he can do in the ones, give him a taste. Even consider Riley O'Brien to give Source a bit of a rest and a recharge. John O'Beach was another one, and I'll touch on the SANFL before we finish up tonight, but John O'Beach is another one who's making every post a winner at the moment, and it wouldn't be the worst decision in the world to actually give him a run in the ones and elevate him as well. That said, we're still in the mix. We're still 4-4. Obviously, the ladder's relatively tight, and all is not lost. But we have another big game against the Geelong Cats next Friday night, who are sitting comfortably in second position at the moment, and we're well and truly back in the pack. We're even on points with West Coast, Melbourne, and Port Adelaide, which, given our tough start to the season, is not a bad place to be in, considering we could have very easily been 2-6. So being 4-3, or sorry, 2-5, but being 4-3, I think is probably a start we would have taken at the beginning of the year. But that doesn't mean that we need to be satisfied with it, given that we're already there now. We've got the Cats next week and a win at home to elevate us back up the ladder, put us back on terms with the likes of Hawthorn and GWS and the Western Buldogs, keep us in touch with the top four, and hopefully be able to take advantage of our slightly softer run home. Games like the upcoming match on Friday night are games that we just cannot afford to drop. And if we can stick that one, perhaps we can give the likes of Walker and some other unfit players a bit of a rest and jig the team around for the next couple of weeks. Okay, so 30 minutes of that crap. I want to say a little bit of a word about the umpiring. And those of you who have been following the conversation on Big Footy in the last 24 hours, most of this has already been said. But it's, in my opinion, it's just I went through in the Hawthorn game. I went through each free that Hawthorn got paid, and I think we worked out that 6 were probably legitimate, 4 were probably 50-50, and the rest were shit. Well, I tell you what, you only have to be relatively aware of statistical probability to understand that when one umpire gives a 3-2 count and the other umpire, I think, gives an 8-6 count, and these umpires are umpiring different zones on the ground at different times, so it's not as if they're defensive or forward 50 umpiring. They're all through the ground all night. And then you have one umpire that can see the game so differently with the same group of players at basically the same time and go on a 17-1 blitz against the Crows. Questions need to be asked. The only free kick that he paid for the entire evening to Adelaide was the push in the back to Rory Sloane at the end of the game. And quite frankly, if he'd have missed that one, then it would have been just too obvious, Mark. So you just had to pay it. Not only was it the 17 frees that he paid, but it was the non-frees as well. And I'm not going to go through them because we've gone through them ad infinitum. And I watched the replay this afternoon, and I swear to God, between the Hawthorn game and watching the replay, and then the Western Bulldogs game and watching the replay, it's a wonder I've got any TV sets left in my house. Seriously, I fired up again this afternoon watching that game because the inconsistency that was shown by that particular umpire, the willingness to pay free kicks to one team and not pay similar free kicks to the other team, was borderline comedic. It was actually funny. If I was watching Collingwood Carlton and witnessing one of those two teams getting bent over by one particular umpire like that, I would have found it funny. So obvious that it was funny. It takes on a sinister aspect when we consider that the game was an evenly balanced game prior to the match. Both teams sitting on equal points, both teams playing a similar style of football. The Western Buldogs' home ground advantage probably offset by a couple of key outs to them. Both teams in good form. It was a line ball decision, and yet, despite the betting markets originally reflecting that, I think we opened $1.75 slight favourites over the Bulldogs, $1.80 or something to that degree. By match time, I'm pretty sure that the Bulldogs were into about $1.60 and we were out to $2.10. Now, in such a big betting market, a big money betting market, that sort of a fluctuation in a two-horse race cannot be ignored. That sort of fluctuation is normally seen following a key out, say, a Tex Walker missing the game, a later mission, that sort of thing. But to see such money come in for one team in such an evenly balanced contest, and late money is always smart money, it seems to me that there are only one or two possibilities. The one possibility is that the umpire is on the take. Now, I don't subscribe to that theory. I don't think we've gotten to the point yet in Australian rules football where umpires, players or officials are influenced by external bookmakers. I don't think we've hit the same levels as cricket and other sports in which betting has become a problem. But I will say this. If the smart money is following an umpiring appointment, then the smart money, the money that follows trends meticulously, day in, day out, week in, week out, in every sport, in every code, they bet on trends. And if it's starting to become apparent within the AFL that certain umpires, for either a lack of competency or whatever you want to call it, are influencing results to such an extent, then the AFL have a problem. The AFL need to look into this problem. I'm sure that betting agencies are looking into the fluctuation that occurred in the Bulldogs Adelaide game, and having looked to make sure, or basically following the money. But I don't think the umpires are being done any favours by the AFL. We've had two instances now, and this has been occurring for years, where certain umpires with declared allegiances to certain teams are allowed to umpire games where those teams are participating. Now, whether or not the umpire is biased, the umpire is being put in an untenable position by the AFL for being appointed to that game. And I think it's about time, with so much money in the sport, so much riding on every contest, with the game supposedly more even than it's ever been across the competition, it is time that the AFL looked at the umpiring situation, made them professional, made them declare their allegiances, and did not allow umpires with declared allegiances for certain teams to umpire those teams in any round. There's enough umpires in rotation to be able to spread the load, and it's about time that this was taken seriously. Gil McLachlan has said before that he's concerned about the possibility of betting influencing the sport in the coming years. It's happened in just about every other code on the planet. There is no reason, just the same as the drug scandal wasn't supposed to happen in AFL, there is no reason why a betting scandal will not hit the AFL at some point in the future. And rather than focusing on some timekeeper making a $5 bet, we need to start looking at the bigger picture. We need to start getting more professional as a code and looking at this instant with the umpire. If I've grown up barracking for the Crows and I'm an umpire, then I will have a subconscious bias to the Crows. It doesn't matter how fair I am. It doesn't matter how fair I want to be. It has an influence, and it can influence two ways. It can either influence me by paying more frees to the team that I grew up loving and supporting through subconscious bias, or it can have the opposite effect and actually make me more focused on not paying too many frees for fear of appearing biased. Either way, it is putting the umpire in a position where he cannot make a call on its merits because he is influenced externally and subconsciously by his allegiance. I think it makes complete sense for the AFL to implement a rule and implement it quickly, where all umpires have their allegiances, their childhood allegiances, whatever you like, put on the table, made public, and those umpires relieved of the pressure of umpiring a team that they have grown up supporting. It makes sense, and it needs to happen right now. In no way am I blaming Mark Pennell for us losing. A case could be made for doing so, but we did enough things wrong for long enough periods during the game to point at ourselves and say we lost the game fair and square. And we did. We were poor. We were lucky to only lose by the few points that we lost by. But this situation is now becoming ridiculous. Unaligned supporters are watching games of football and shaking their heads in disbelief. Social media is continually blowing up about disparity in umpiring decisions and perceived bias. The AFL need to nip this in the bud now, make umpires declare their allegiances, and let them not umpire games that involve teams that they support. And that's all I'm going to say on the umpires this week. So my final word before we move on to the SANFL is that I think we've got some holes that we need to cover. I think we already knew that we had some holes that we needed to cover, and I think our early season form may have given us a slightly rose-coloured view of the situation. But it's clear that we need more pace through the midfield. It's clear that we need a plan B that involves slowing the game down. It appears to me that Pikey needs to reiterate to the team that they have license to be aggressive, to be adventurous with their ball movement. It appears to me that there are a couple of players out of form and carrying injuries that are significant enough that they need a rest, and the match committee need to make a call on whether we continue to play half-fit players or whether we keep one eye on the future, with our premiership window probably opening wider in the coming years, with a slightly less focus on winning the match in front of us, or at least trying to win the match in front of us by playing blokes like Tex unfit. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens on Friday night with Geelong at Adelaide Oval. We don't get the opportunity to play them here often. It's a Friday night game. We're on the national stage once more. We need to make every post a winner against Geelong. Geelong will try and clutter up our midfield. So we have 5 or 6 days to come up with an alternative, and we have 5 or 6 days to clean up our tackling skills, because we will give Joel Selwood 50 free kicks if we tackle him like we tackled blokes on Saturday night. We'll obviously cover that in more detail on Tuesday night with Tuesday Night Live, and then Scorpus will cover it with the teams next Thursday. Just briefly touching on the SANFL, I caught bits of it today. We ended up getting up in a bit of a slogfest, 9 goals 13-67 to 9 goals 9-63. We didn't look convincing. We didn't look terribly interested, apart from maybe a handful of players. Harry Wigg had a good game with 25 posies, 13 kicks, 12 handballs, 4 tackles, 4 clearances, 4 inside 50s, 3 rebound 50s. Not the worst alternative to Rory Laird down back. And in my opinion, he's the type of player that needs to get a run instead of Ricky Henderson in that back pocket. I thought Mitch Grigg had his best game for the season so far. And the stats certainly reflect that. 24 disposals, 17 kicks, 7 handballs, 7 marks, 5 tackles, which is good for him. 4 clearances, 6 inside 50s, a good game by Mitch. Ken Mellis-Yeoman, I'd really like to see him work his way into the midfield rotation. He was such a revelation at the beginning of last year, fell out of favour for whatever reason, maybe affected by the Phil Walsh tragedy. But I think he adds a point of difference to our midfield. I was amazed today to see Patrick Cripps was 193 or 194 centimetres. Marcus Bontempelli is a tall midfielder. Cam Ellis-Yeoman provides us that tall midfield option. He's strong, he's aggressive, he runs in straight lines, and I think it gives us something that we lack, and we need some alternative in the midfield, and I'd like to see Cam get a shot over the next few weeks in the ones. Hugh Greenwood was very good, obviously raw, but for a lad that's come out of a basketball program and played precious little footy over the last few years, he's really showing signs, and it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility that a Category B rookie is elevated to the senior list over the next couple of years and actually plays AFL footy. He's got the raw talent, he's certainly got the drive, and he seems to me to be wanting to make every post a winner. And 18 touches today, 17 kicks, 3 marks, 6 tackles. Certainly a good response, good result for Hugh, and I think 2 goals for as well offers us something, and I think he's one to watch. I also thought Duday had probably his best game so far. It looked a little bit more composed. Certainly has fire in the belly, which is, I think, a quality that Ogilvy identified with him on draft night. And I think he with more development, I don't know whether we'll see him this year, but I think he's certainly one for the future. Jared Lyons was somewhat quiet, but didn't get a lot of game time, I don't think, if I'm reading things correctly. Only the 15 touches. Dropped away a little bit after that. Dean Gore was possibly a little disappointing. Troy Menzel is continuing to develop slowly, only had the 10 posies, and didn't influence the scoreboard, which is where we want Troy to be hitting up. He seems to be drifting up and back and not really getting involved too much. Riley O'Brien, 29 hit-outs, was slightly shaded by James Craig from the Roosters, but Craig's a good ruckman. I think Riley did all right. Not doing much around the ground, though, and that's where I think he needs to concentrate to exert a little bit more influence around the ground. Only the 9 touches, 3 kicks, 6 handballs, only the 3 marks. And wet conditions, I know, but we needed him to stand up. Pardon me. And I've got to say, VB, particularly in the last quarter, probably got us over the line in the end. Spent a lot of time off the ground. But in that last quarter, when the game was there to be won, VB really stood up, as he should. He's a senior player. He's a hardened AFL player. That's the type of performance that you would expect from a player such as him in the twos. And nevertheless, it was good that he was able to deliver. I'll just see if I can find the ladder here. It looks like, I think the Eagles and Panthers had a draw, did they? Someone had a draw, I noticed. They haven't updated the table, good on them. So I think we'll still be sitting in second spot. But probably a little, I did watch a little bit of it today, and, it was a hard slog. North played well, but there's not a huge amount of players really stepping up and putting their hand up, apart from those a couple that I mentioned. So I want to see more out of Dean Gore, want to see more out of Troy Menzel, and those blokes that are around the edges. I want Cam Ellis-Yeoman to continue to push a spot, and I also want to see consistency out of Mitch Grigg if he's going to try and push his way in. I would like to see us give Harrison Wigg a run. I want Henderson out of the back lines, and I think whether it be against the Cats or whether it be the following week, I think we need to give Harry Wigg a run in the ones down back while Rory's out, and let him have a taste of it. Look, that's about it for me. I'm actually amazed that I've been able to get to 50 minutes. Sorry about the 10-minute rant on the umpires, but at least I didn't go through every one of them as I could have. So I'm going to leave it with you there. Thank you very much for joining me and having a listen. We'll be back on Tuesday night with Tuesday Night Live with a special guest this week. Macca23 will be joining us as a guest this week, and then as a permanent panel member in weeks to come. So look out for Macca. and we've got some good news regarding players and past players coming in over the next coming weeks. So thanks again. Commiserations to us, but you live and learn. So we'll see you next week.